Hi, and welcome to the latest BattleGoat Studios developer blog. Today we want to do something that's a little bit inspired by some recent discussions on our social media platforms. And this comes up every now and then, that people want to know how the AI in the game makes decisions, how it does certain things. And I'm the project manager, I do design level stuff, I help our artists and our coders keep their pipelines moving. I really don't have the answers. I often have to turn to George, our lead programmer, who really has built the AI over the course of all the Supreme Ruler games. So, George, I'm going to ask you some questions today, try and figure out things I can ask you, so hopefully the community can get a better sense for how the AI does stuff. First thing I want to ask, based on recent questions, is people were wanting to know when the AI is in control of a country and it has military forces, maybe some allies, some enemies, how is it prioritizing, deciding, taking actions? Where does it begin and where does it go from there?
Yeah, one of the things, and we've had some discussions about Supreme Ruler Ultimate's AI and how it does things and how people sometimes don't get a clear understanding of how complex it is or the decisions it makes. But one of the things that is really unique about how the BattleGoat engine, which is both the Supreme Rule engine and the Galactic Rule engine, does its AI, is it actually uses a number of layers that actually simulate how a player itself might manage their own region and their own decisions. So with AIs, we have a sort of a top level, which is the ruler AI, which replaces the human player. So when you actually have an opponent that is controlling its entire region, its entire faction in GR, then the ruler AI is the top level control. And in our engine, the ruler AIs actually run on different threads, so they take full advantage of multi-threaded machines and machines that have multiple cores. And below the ruler AI is the minister AI, which actually then works both for the AI players and the human players. So if the human players turn on their minister capabilities, the minister AI does its decision level, or AI factions can use that as well. And those also run on multiple threads. So again, making the game performance take advantage of multiple cores. And then below that is the unit AI level, which is where individual units, the military units themselves, have their own decision-making authority. They'll do things like look around, identify enemies, report issues that they see, and at that level is when they actually take advantage of being able to move units and take land and so on. If the AI decides it wants to declare war, that's done at the top level, and then it informs its ministers, so the ministers will change their spending priorities, production priorities, and things like that, and then the units at the bottom level are told, you're at war, attack region X, take over new territory, and do things like that will implement the decisions from above.
Right. And I know that you and I have talked over the years about some of the way that implementation rolls out, of having that middle level minister identifying areas of the map that are important, and then the units themselves responding to that importance. And some of the hotspots that are accessible to the players, my understanding from our discussions is you're using some of those hotspots to direct the units. Maybe a little talk about that.
With the BattleGoat engine, we actually have a pretty unique system for handling things that are internally. When we consider hotspots, actually have a secondary or a bigger piece that are called AI requests. And the AI requests can be created by ministers, can be created by the AI rulers, and then when a human player puts down a hotspot, it also creates internally what's called an AI request. And the AI request is what does things like indicates this area or this battle zone or this hex is important. I want this defended. I want this area to be used as a staging point for units to gather to attack something. I want this is an area in maybe an enemy territory that I want our units to go towards. So all of that can be done by the AI request. So when a player creates a hotspot, it creates this system, and then the AI requests are actually tracked and rated, and what response there is, how many units have responded, has air power been responded to that, and so on. When it's done by the AI, it can actually even tweak a few more factors about it, how important is that element, how long should it last, and things like that. So in the case of, if an AI decides to do a naval invasion, it often creates a sequence of AI requests. First, get the units deployed and gather them at a port, and then after that, launch from the port onto the naval invasion to the other region. So again, pretty fine-grained internally, and then at the higher level, the AI will use decision-making to decide the importance of things and where to place those requests.
And that decision system, I'm already hearing you talking about what are obviously lots of variables going into it. And if we think about the real world, every decision has almost an infinite number of factors you could choose to consider, but if you consider them all, you're going to achieve nothing. So internally, our engine must be choosing certain variables worth checking, certain factors that it's going to prioritize. And I'm thinking whether it's two enemies on different fronts or two different economic goals, how are you helping the AI decide where to focus itself?
And in our game, very little is scripted. I mean, in SRU, the Supreme Ruler series, we do use scripting for historical purposes, but outside of that, very little is actually done by scripting. It is all done by using weighting and AI decisions based on weighting of factors. Some of these are actually exposed to the players and modders. So for example, the decision on what type of units to build, the AI weighting file is the AI params file, which can be modded by players. So they can decide if they want the units that are being produced when they're on an offensive to prefer speed or to prefer firepower or to prefer defense. And if they set their minister to be defensive, maybe they're going to do cost and other things. So all of those weightings are exposed and players can adjust them. And just something like building a unit involves about 30 or 40 parameters, 30 or 40 weights that are determined. And then other pieces are thrown into the equation. How much money do you have? If your money is low, then the weighting of the cost of the unit becomes higher. Cheaper units are preferred. If you have lots and lots of units, again, the quality of unit then might be preferred instead of the quantity, the build time. And when it comes to things like the AI deciding at a higher level, who do I like, who do I not like, things like common influences are done there. So who is the friend of my friend? Do they have the same type of government type as me? Do they have the same? Do they like me with their civilian and leader values? Does the world market like them and like me? So all of those again are all thrown into the weighting, and we even have the influence values that are used a lot in the Supreme Ruler series to determine commonalities. So if somebody has an influence value set for their religion and I have the same influence value set for mine, then again we share commonality, yes. And so that indicates whether we're more likely to be friends or enemies.
And that's definitely something that I've seen us revise over the years, that we've tried to give regions what are logical, historical base influences. And throughout, as time goes by, because it's been a number of years since we released the game, I know that we've tweaked some of the influences as things have changed internally within countries in the world. And on the economic side, and this will probably be our last one for today because I'm realizing this topic, not surprisingly, is giant. We'll need multiple videos to cover all of this. But I guess, again, thinking about how you're deciding, give you a more concrete example, that if my country is critically short on two different commodities, say I'm short on ore and I'm short on electricity, and I've told my minister to do it, or if it's an AI region that faces this struggle, how does it decide if it's going to tackle one, the other, both?
Yeah, sometimes, of course, it'll weigh things like the availability of goods, what its total production is, how much of the demand it's meeting, how much that is affecting other elements. Certainly things that are, if you give your minister priority for military importance, then goods that have a military use are more important. So, for example, in GR, food would be reduced in importance, and your energy and your finished goods would be increased in importance. And if you put consumer support as higher, then the reverse would be there. One element that is going to be for a future discussion is, of course, looking at Galactic Ruler and the new elements that the AI has to now take into account. In SRU, we sort of had a relatively easy concept that the AIs, if they're going to be aggressive, they're going to want to take over the world. So everybody wants to be, a little fascist running around Europe. But in GR, because you have these multiple levels of exploration, you know, your system, and you exploit your planet, then you exploit maybe your moons, and then you expand to your system, and then other systems, we are going to have to give the AI some new elements of consideration. And this is one of the things we're working on right now. That's one of the pieces that's still in development in GR, is getting the AIs to understand the entire universe and not just their planets.
Right. So definitely, this is a topic that I'm realizing I could ask you a dozen more questions, and we haven't really even scratched the surface of how, well, I guess we've started this question of the AI functionality that's been built before for the SR series has a lot of carryover into Galactic Ruler, but adaptations need to be made. The fact that overreaching takes on a whole new definition when you start leaving your planet or leaving your system. So we'll wrap at that for today, but if you guys have specific questions around the AI, feel free to hop on any of our social media accounts, leave us a hashtag GRQ, we'll watch for it. And this is definitely a topic, even before the community comes back to us, I can envision us doing at least one or two more of these chats to give you guys a bit more insight into how it's done. So yeah, find us on all the usual social media, leave us the questions you got, and we'll see you in the next video.